Welcome to the Foul Play YouTube channel. This is a PowderPuff edition.
Hi there, welcome to PowderPuff. Today we have with us Bibi, Neverly, Nan's Life, Maz, and myself. Want to talk about something today. Neverly brought it to my attention about an affidavit of Bennett L. Gershman. He says, I'm a professor of law at Pace Law School in White Plains, New York, and an attorney licensed to practice law in the state of New York. I have been retained by the law firm of Kathleen Zellner to prepare this affidavit. I am submitting this affidavit in support of the defendant's motion to vacate his conviction. If you want to read along, or if you want to read this document, the link will be in the description. So I'm going to ask you ladies if have you read this over, and Neverly, where in the world did you find this? I didn't know it existed.
Oh, I saw it years ago. Or should I say a long time ago, not years ago, but long time ago, and kind of forgotten about it. But I loved it at the time so much that it kind of stayed in my memory. And then I was talking to a friend who suggested to do this as for a PowderPuff edition, and I jumped all over it.
Oh, I'm so glad you did, because I read this and it seems pretty it seems like it's going to be effective in at least showing, about our special prosecutor and how much he damaged Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey's case before it ever really got started.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful read. It's an easy, actually, read. And as I was reading it, I didn't know if I should cry or gloat. Really had
I did a little
you know what I mean,
bit
like
of,
mixed feelings about it. And this
yeah.
is if you look at the credentials of Bennett Gershman, I mean, they go on and on and on and on. And he submitted this affidavit to the Honorable Judge Angela Sutkevich,
Mm-hmm.
who was the presiding judge in the lower court for Stephen Avery, right?
Yep.
And I found it very funny when in his first paragraph said something that, he goes, I am of legal majority and I can truthfully and completely testify to the matters contained herein based by my personal knowledge, factual statements and so forth. And then he goes in the next sentence, I'm of sound mind and I'm not taking any medication. Nor have I ingested any alcohol that would impair my memory. I'm sorry for laughing,
I
but
know.
this is funny.
I read it and I laughed too, because I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, I know.
Mm.
It cracked me up because I'm like, obviously, not everybody. Oh,
Who was he talking about?
yeah,
Mm.
I know, right? Yeah. But basically, this is his affidavit, but we are talking about the prosecutorial misconduct, which is an illegal act or it's a failing to act on the part of a prosecutor, especially an attempt to sway the jury to wrongfully convict a defendant or to impose a harsher than appropriate punishment. And this is exactly why Mr. Gershman did this. Kathleen Zellner asked him to do it. Just he assessed and evaluated Ken Kratz's prosecutorial conduct.
Yep.
And, in 20 pages or 28 pages that he did, and he studied everything. I mean, it's a professional job. You can tell he put bullet points why exactly he thinks, opines that Mr. Kratz, I don't want to call him Mr. Kratz, that fat Kratz did what he did. And I don't want to really want to talk about Kratz. It's just like what that person, that prosecutor, the special prosecutor of all people, has done to do exactly this, to impose a harsher than appropriate punishment and to sway the jury to wrongfully convict a defendant. It's really a disgrace. And how that was allowed, we don't know.
Well, he went through
Well, we
in
can
this
speculate.
affidavit and described each of the press conferences that were held and actually quoted some of what Kratz said to point out exactly what his
Where he went
wrongs were.
wrong. Yep.
Yeah. I
Yep.
mean,
Let me tell you, this is a report card. Kratz failed.
yep.
Kratz
Oh,
failed so
he should have
bad they
been
took away
expelled.
2 grades. Yeah, they took away
Yeah.
2 grades, and he had to go back. Yeah, he completely failed.
Yes, Kratz is like he was entirely responsible for all of it happening. That is his job as the prosecutor, was to put all this in. And then it's not the police who make the charge. He's the one who has to put it. And he did.
But he did it maliciously. He knew
He did
exactly what he was doing. That's the sad and that's the disgusting part. He absolutely misused his position, his knowledge, his experience, and his protected, yes, power.
Yeah.
That's very, very well protected to do what he did.
Well, in the first place, he, and it does say in this affidavit that they are well within their rights to identify the perpetrators, but the thing is, I don't feel like he left out any details. And I know when they are going to give a press conference, they generally describe what has happened as far as, okay, this person was missing, her remains were found, and this is where it was found, or, gave a general location and maybe even identify who they've got under arrest for suspects. But he went so far as to totally, completely implicate everything that they did it in every detail. And that totally could not have been right.
Yes, he presented it like his word was gospel, and this was what happened, and that makes it misconduct.
Yeah, and he definitely used that rule, do as I say, not as I do,
Mm-hmm.
because he
Well,
was
and it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
absolutely, absolutely. And remember how last week we did the whole victimology and how we said, that there are two components that you really try to, two goals that you really try to avoid, which one of them is vilification and the other one was deification.
Yep.
When, glorifying the victim and vilifying the suspect or
Deified.
the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, deified. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, Kratz was charging Stephen Avery based on Brandon Dess's confession, which was constituted as a professional misconduct. And then he attempted to introduce in evidence allegation of Stephen Avery's prior wrongful acts, which is also professional misconduct. Yet, he was trying to suppress the 85 rape, the wrongful conviction, and the setup as
Yep.
the fact. He said, well, never mind, we're not talking about that. But he's trying to introduce it as an evidence that he was a rapist. You see what I'm saying? That he has
And
already been accused of this.
what I gathered out of this affidavit was basically that, Kratz putting out his press conference the way he did was like, yep, we have this crime, here's the criminal, and basically inciting the general public to want for punishment for him long before he even hits the courtroom. And that's when I ask, what did Kratz do to Stephen Avery's right to be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law? Well, he screwed that all up.
He
made
completely
sure.
destroyed it.
Yeah.
He completely destroyed it. And this guy points out, I'm sorry, I can't remember. He points out
Gershman.
that from
Gresham.
the press conference, the opening statements, several places in the court itself, in his closing comments, in his correspondence with Steve, in his continuing to stay in the public eye and do interviews long after the fact and to stay on social media, that every single thing that Kratz has done is wrong and misconduct all the way through every beat of it.
Yeah.
And this guy
And
goes 28 pages, 27 of them definitely, explaining point by point of every single thing that he did
mind you,
wrong.
Gershman is the professor who teaches judges and attorneys and governors about ethics. He knows what's going on. And in preparing the statement, he also educated himself, pardon me, and he read the criminal complaints against Stephen Avery and Brendan Dassey and amended complaints about Stephen Avery and all of that. And he also read the Wisconsin rules of professional conduct for attorneys. So there is such thing.
Yeah,
But
we knew,
you know what I
right?
mean? There is such thing. Yeah, yeah.
They do
Unbelievable.
exist.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You
So
hear
yeah,
that, people? There is.
The-
There's such a thing as rules.
what I liked
For
about
Wisconsin. Yes.
his approach is he went also over Kratz's accomplishments and education and everything else, and he gave him some credit for being, a prosecutor for 25 years, that he was appointed by the governor to be a special district attorney on this case, that he was also on the board for domestic abuse, Wisconsin Crime Victims' Rights and Board,
Yeah.
So he gave him all this credit. And then, boom, he slammed him, which is like the best part because Kratz is not an idiot. Kratz is very, very smart. He's just very malicious,
Kratz,
very
of all
nefarious.
people, with his background, should have known better.
Oh, absolutely.
without doubt.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been allowed to get away with that here in the UK, that's for sure. No way.
Yeah. So let's talk about the press conference and what went wrong, right? You want to do that?
Yeah, sure.
Or
Like
what went right
everything.
about
Yeah,
it?
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read it from there because I'm not that smart, So it says here, for a prosecutor, the press conference is the most powerful forum in which to communicate to the public. A press conference gives you a prosecutor the opportunity to express in a dramatic way to results of an investigation, the crimes being charged, and the involvement of persons accused of committing those crimes, right? Because there is a risk that the press conference can prejudice the right of an excuse of a fair trial.
Yep.
Exclamation point. Ethics rules strictly circumcise what a prosecutor can say at a press conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's allowed to make statements that serve a legitimate law enforcement purpose. For example, the substance of the charges, the circumstances of the arrest, and the identity of the defendants. A prosecutor is prohibited from making comments that would have a substantial likelihood of materially what's the word is?
Prejudice?
Yeah, that one. And the other one proceeding. So that was very smart of me. I can't even pronounce
You're
it.
okay. Hey,
Yeah.
That's all right. It's legal speak.
That's right.
Yeah, it's legal speak.
You're doing
Basically,
great.
you're precluded to put any mud on this trial that hasn't even started.
Right.
So you can say what happened, how it happened, just like in general speak, general terms, and general information. You can go into the detail. And what did Kratz do? Oh my!
Every
Half
little
naked, sweaty at the door.
Totally the opposite.
Yeah.
Yes.
He even said, you know, if you knew Teresa Hallback or if you have little children in the room, you may not want to watch this.
15 or younger, yeah. Yeah.
So he knew right from the start. It just didn't happen when he started rolling with it.
No.
He knew right from the start that he was gonna tank Steve Avery right there. He aimed a torpedo at Steve and fired it right there.
Yep.
Yeah, and he said, you know, he was. Go ahead, Maz.
No, I was saying, how was he not pulled up for it though?
It's Wisconsin.
That's
You
it's
tell me.
Wisconsin. He had Pago sitting next to him.
Prosecutor.
Yeah,
He's
really special.
Who was responsible to report?
I don't know, because whoever is responsible, they didn't. But Zellner got on.
Would it have been the judge? I mean, he did mark a bunch of his stuff. What is that? Kretz tried to get in. He marked a bunch of stuff inadmissible and like sealed it until court was over.
Yes.
Yes.
And what he did by that, Judge Willis, he said, you know what, this has nothing to do with this. This is just BS. You can't corroborate Dassey's confession because there's nothing to corroborate, right? There was no evidence. It was purely a confession that he did that was fed to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was some bits about his past he wouldn't let him enter too, maybe.
Yes. And what did he do, Kratz? He then wrote in the book, whatever it was sealed, he brought it up in his stupid book.
Oh, and the book was another thing he wasn't supposed to do. He could write a book, but not about any of the special information that he's privy to, and he broke those rules too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is the justice? I mean, for real. Where
there is none.
the justice?
This is why that one guy is teaching a class on what not to do, and he's using Kratz.
Well, he better. It's a damn good example.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say about that. I mean, it's sickening. It really, really is.
Yeah.
And there's like some detective class that they're teaching using Uyghur and Fassbender or whatever as examples of what not to do.
Yes.
That's how bad this was.
Yes, there was a
3 of the main characters are fucking being used as used as an example used as an example to how not to do things in your career.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this man is a extremely valid person now that is giving this affidavit. I believe that it's going to give Zellner more ammunition to work with, honestly.
Oh, yes. And I think we should post
We
this
just need a
on
court.
the Guilters side as well, so they could see, you know, how their beloved Kratz, you know, nailed this one.
They
look
don't
what
care.
he did.
No,
I know that they don't care.
No.
Because they think the same as he does. They have to, or else they wouldn't be agreeing with his actions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would like to go over something that Gershman said, which is that at the Avery, it's point 29. At Avery's trial, Kratz argued in his summation of the uncontested and uncontroversial facts proved several issues. First, he argued that uncontested and uncontroversial facts pointed to Stephen Avery as one person. Remember that? Who is exclusively responsible for the death of Teresa Hallback. Kratz argued in his summation, there is no question about who is responsible for the death and the mutilation of Teresa Hallback. All of the evidence points to one person. That's the one person being responsible. I'm going to argue at the conclusion of this case who that one person is. I bet you can guess who I'm going to suggest was responsible. He's even mocking, right? Yeah. The facts are uncontested, uncontroverted. Stephen Avery was the last person to see Teresa alive. All the early clues pointed to one man, one person, the last person to see her alive. Who's involved in the mutilation process? The evidence keeps pointing out to that individual. All of the evidence points to only one person, and other suspects were checked out. There was no evidence pointing to a suspect other than Avery. Come on.
Yeah,
And
right.
then
They
he
really
goes
checked out.
on. Yeah. And then, so it's one person only, right? And then he says, Kratz also argued that Teresa Halbach's death was caused by 2 gunshots to her head. He argued, we're going to hear about gunshots to the head. The instrumentality of the murder was a .22 caliber rifle. We will actually be arguing to you that Mr. Avery held that weapon in his hands when Miss Halbach was killed. Teresa's death was caused by 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Mind you, this is perfect timing to talk about this because on Sunday, Coffee with Foul Play, Dr. Silkman is going to go over item FL, and this is his masterpiece, I swear. And then it says Teresa's potential and future aspirations were snuffed out by one act, and by one act from one person. And Teresa Halbach was killed by gunshot wound. And she was killed in Avery's garage. No blood was found in the trailer. I know, this is like insanity. But since Teresa wasn't killed in the trailer, there shouldn't be any blood in the trailer. You see? Oh, he agrees to something. She was not killed in the trailer. Where was Teresa killed? This is an easy answer, or at least it's an answer that is directed by all the physical evidence in this case. By all physical evidence in this case. We know that that's all BS. Teresa Halbach was killed in the garage, and she was killed in Stephen Avery's garage, right? But then, never mind that. Erase, delete, because we're going to talk about Brandon's trial, right? And we know what happened there. He changed the whole dynamics, the instrumentation, the location, and how many people did this.
And also, he changed from, in Avery's case, he actually had them omit the name Brendan Dassey and have someone may have helped.
Yes. Another person.
Yeah.
And he removed Dassey's name because he didn't want the jury thinking they should get a hear from Dassey.
Right.
Yes. But he did that so cleverly, knowing that for 11 months, media has talked nothing but about Dassey's confession.
Right.
So who is that other person? Dassey.
Yeah, they already know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Well,
and so all of those things right there were misconduct, and he used all the big words. You know, how terrible of a job he did at it, and all the little places where he deliberately did this, and
Well, we know. We know we're waiting on the hammer to drop because this is absolutely absurd. Absurd.
Yeah, so Gershman said that Kratz's inconsistent contentions at the Avery and Dassey trials violate due process as well as the prosecutor's duty to promote the truth and serve justice. We don't even have to go into details if we don't want to, but just like right there, what he did was exactly that. He violated the due process.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was done all in bad faith. And you cannot say that at one trial it was Stephen and Stephen only, that she was killed by a gunshot, that she was shot in the head, and that she died in the trailer. No, I'm sorry, in the garage. And then to flip and say that at Brendan's trial, he claimed that Brendan Dassey killed Teresa Halbach, or at least participated in her killing with Stephen.
And he said that she was never ever found a crime scene.
Exactly. And then they said, that Avery stabbed her in the stomach and she was killed like that, with Dassey slitting her throat and with Stephen manually strangling her and then incidentally adding a gunshot to the whole thing. This is all Like, wait a second. How could you say that, on Brenda's trial, that Teresa was killed in Avery's trailer, not in the garage? And mind you, we also had two different times, because with Stephen, that happened around like 2:45, 3, and with Brendan, it was after he came from school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the timelines on all that doesn't even fit.
No.
Not with the time that she was supposedly there, and the time those boys get off the bus.
Somebody said something to that effect too, Kratz, once on social media. Mm-hmm. And he said what timeline? He never presented a timeline.
That's right.
Well, the guy is a pathological liar. Yeah. He's also scared, and he's protecting what he said. So he's going to say it, and he's going to lie through his teeth. He's going to think it's the truth because he basically, he doesn't have a choice.
He did not present a timeline because even he knew that didn't line up. That did not match, and that was not correct. There's a whole lot of stuff here that he said and did, but if you really step back and look at the whole big picture, there's a whole lot of stuff that he didn't say and he didn't do on purpose.
And he didn't want said, yeah.
That's right. Because he's so busy running his mouth all the time that people have yet to realize that some of the most important stuff in this case, he purposefully avoided it and averted your attention from it in every way possible. I got his number.
Yeah, and okay, I'm going to sound all you.
But if you use it, then he'll text you back.
Oh, dear.
Whatever. Go for it, man. Bring it on. I don't care. I already know. I know a lot of people know.
Yeah. But he was
remember how he...
Go ahead. Go ahead, Neverly.
Remember how he contacted Avery while he was in prison, when he was at the lowest point of his life?
Yeah.
He was serving life in prison for nothing that he did, that Kratz himself put there. Then he contacts Stephen by letter and say, hey, now that you're there and all your appeals are gone, it's not a conflict of interest. If you want, I can talk to you. And I would like to write a book about the truth. You can tell me the truth of what happened, but you're not going to get anything out of this deal. It's all for my purposes. So think about it. It's like, what? You're taunting him now.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're totally taunting him. And that's also illegal. Not only that it's rude, that it's manipulative, that it's just disgusting, right? And it's like harassing and abusing a poor person, whether it's Avery or anybody else that's in that situation.
He knew the man was in there and he was innocent.
Well, and he likened the Slayer, he likened it to Kratz contacting them domestic violence victims.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Funny that you mentioned that, because this Gershman guy also compares that to what.
Yeah, that's the guy I was talking about.
Yes.
Gershman. I can't remember this guy's name.
We know that you're like that, but we still love you.
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he compared Kratz's actions towards Avery while he was in prison about the whole book to the sexting to the victims of domestic violence that he was representing. In either way, he was holding a carrot in front of their noses, right? And acting like this superior, presenting himself as a helper, but actually we all know that that's not it. That he was just satisfying his ego and his whatever sick dreams. So, but in ethics, it talks about that, So it says that not only that he was writing a book, what making a murderer gets wrong, but he also appeared on various television shows to promote that book. And we know how he was spewing lies all left and right? And Kratz's book and media appearances describe in vivid detail how he claims Avery sexually assaulted his ex-wife, his former girlfriend, his niece, his babysitter, then horrific torture of a cat, and a variety other violent acts. It's like enough is enough. What is his obsession over this? The only obsession is that you can use it to write a book, to make money off of it, and to have his glory still be alive.
Oh, yeah.
With
That's
this
what I think.
grand scope of misconduct, you should think he shouldn't be able to fall under that protected rule because he kind of broke the contract by committing all this misconduct.
Yes, it says here, indeed, these allegations parallel the inflammatory allegations Kratz made against Avery in his sealed motion to Judge Willis. To be sure, the First Amendment protects Kratz freedom to publish and talk about his book. Like, that's fine. But as an attorney and a former lead prosecutor who put Avery and Dassey in jail on their cases, right? Kratz's free speech rights are constrained by ethical rules. Two separate rules of professional ethics limit Kratz's freedom to speak about the prosecution. The first one is the prohibition applicable to all lawyers in making extrajudicial statements that could impair a criminal defendant's right to a fair trial. And second, a prohibition against a former prosecutor disclosing in a book or media appearance confidential information in connection with the case he prosecuted. Because why? Maybe at the time, Avery didn't have a lawyer, and he was all feeling defeated and pretty much didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. But boom, here comes Kathleen, and now his case is alive again. And if Kratz disclosed something in that book that was sealed, that's what they say that it's against professional ethics.
Oh, for sure.
And right. That's right. But he knows all of that, and
Right.
he just didn't care.
No. But he is so used to saying and doing whatever he wants and getting away with it. He's protected. His status, his career is a big, giant shield for him. At that point,
Yeah.
I mean, you mean it makes him feel like he's a prize?
And a fat one. Yeah. And a fat one. Yeah.
but this is just a perfect example of, the special prosecutor gone wild. I feel like there was absolutely no limitation for him. He had no one
No.
putting him in check or reminding him of ethics of any kind. I don't believe
Well,
that.
he was high as a kite, and he was doing
Yeah.
all these things that only a person that's insane or high on drugs can do. He was still taunting Stephen after this whole ugly ordeal, after he ruined Stephen's life and his family and children, not to mention everything else. Go into it. And he had an audacity to write Stephen and say, unfortunately, you only want to continue your nonsense about being set up. That's too bad because you had one opportunity to finally tell all the details, but now that will never happen. How?
Well, and that was over one sentence because Stephen asked, did you check all the fingerprints that were on the car?
Yes.
And that was his return response to that. Oh, since
Yeah,
you
he
still
said,
want to
I
go
thought,
on that you were framed,
yeah.
and you don't want to tell the truth, and
And I
he
thought you
tried
were
to
interested
Brandon
in being
Dassey him.
honest.
So
Yeah.
with Stephen Avery asking him legitimately about that was his response. Really? Really?
Is Crack still protected now, or does Stephen get a new trial by Kathleen Zellner? Can she throw the book at Crack?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
I think he's still protected, but you would think with this blatant,
What?
complete from beginning to end misconduct every step of the way, even to this day, that should have been a break in the contract of being a special prosecutor, and should leave him open to whatever, some kind of penalty. You
You
know,
would think, but I don't think that's gonna look
Well,
at the other
if
case
it
of
was
Ryan
us,
Ferguson.
if it was us doing that to them, you're damn right we'd go to jail for it or prison or whatever.
well,
Oh,
I
for
Yeah.
don't
sure.
care how
But
special. Go ahead.
oh, he's special, all right. But he doesn't have a license now. He doesn't have a license. He's not
That's what I mean.
practicing
If he doesn't have a license,
because
then how can he still
because he claims we've ruined his life by telling our
uh,
lies.
what a
I thought he
shame.
got his license to
Yeah,
practice law back, but just nobody will hire him now because we've ruined his life and we kept putting false
no,
reviews on
I'm
Yelp about him. And
pretty
He
sure that I
hasn't seen
read
yet.
somewhere where he didn't pay his fees, and so
oh, oh yeah,
No, he
Brokey
went through
Brokerson.
bankruptcy, I think, too. But I don't care about that. I just think
No.
that this Gershman, Bennett Gershman, was disgusted, truly, honestly, as a fellow human being, to have read and kind of informed himself of what Kratz did. He says Kratz's conduct in approaching the man he vilified, brought unsubstantiated charges against, convicted of murder and sent to prison for life without parole in order to, and I quote, tell his story, is unlike any conduct of any ex-prosecutor I have ever encountered. So it's not
Exactly.
just truthers spewing venom against Kratz. This is a professional,
Yep.
a
Yeah.
highly regarded, reputable professional who can say this.
Yep.
That guy
Kratz's
had like
conduct
what
is
12 or
offensive.
he had like 12 or 15 pages there of credentials, right?
Yes, yes.
Oh,
He says
yes.
Kratz's conduct is offensive to the proper administration of justice. His intimidation and manipulation for his own selfish motive of the person he prosecuted impairs the dignity of the legal profession and the ethical responsibility of lawyers to abstain from overreaching, harassing, and manipulative conduct. Enough said. Beautifully said. We don't need to talk about anything anymore.
Right.
So it's
Right.
not just us crying like, oh, poor Stephen and, fat Kratz, but Kratz, but Kratz. No,
No.
this is acknowledged by somebody who teaches ethics to the judges. And not like one Kratz thought that he's going to be the superstar of
In New
Wisconsin.
York. In New
Yeah.
York.
Uh-huh. Yeah, in New York.
Which,
And
there's more cases of more kinds of things and way more crime and worse crime in New York than there is in Wisconsin. So, you
yes,
know,
and he mocked actually Kratz. He called him an ambulance chaser.
yes, he likened
Yeah.
him to the equivalent of an ambulance
No,
chaser.
he's a
Yeah,
Yes.
special ambulance
Yeah.
chaser.
Yeah.
he
Because
was.
Hello.
Kratz's conduct, in my opinion, is even more nefarious. Kratz had a personal involvement with Avery and sought to manipulate that connection under the guise of appearing to act on Avery's behalf to help him tell his honest story so the public would understand both sides. But of course, Kratz's appeal for Avery's cooperation, ostensibly for disinterested motives, was a sham. Kratz wanted to write a book and get the person he prosecuted to help him. This is disgusting. This is like sadistic, right?
Yes, I agree. I think
Yeah.
so.
And then he said, moreover, there is an uncanny parallel between Kratz's solicitation of Avery as a private lawyer and Kratz's solicitation of vulnerable women when he was a prosecutor.
Exactly.
Exactly. With
Exactly.
all, yeah. Unbelievable.
Yes. But, I don't care how special you think you are. There are laws and ethics in place for people like you, Kratz. That's what I
Oh,
have to
yeah.
say.
And then he got in trouble because one woman, the domestic violence victim of Kratz also, um, She came out and then he cried wolf. Oh, poor me. I'm sorry. Bad judgment. It's only one time. Please forgive me. I have 25 years of experience and I've done many favors to other people. Please understand it won't happen again. Like a kid, who gets in trouble and tells their mommy. But then 10 or 15 other women came out with the same pretty much story. It was a cookie cutter, that his ammo was the same.
These stories have come back from like 1997.
Yes.
His behavior.
So he lied to the board that it was only once, and he lied that when he said he will never do it again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Gershman said Kratz tried to defend his appalling behavior towards the women by raising incredible, inconsistent, hyper-technical, and puzzling arguments. He's claimed that he wanted to amicably resolve the disciplinary proceedings according to the Wisconsin Supreme Court orders on the intellectually insulting. So somebody who is like way, 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 way higher on the educational level and probably on the level of power is calling Kratz all these names, that his actions border the intellectually insulting.
It was disgraceful.
Mm-hmm.
Period. To the profession, to men in general. Just feel like, hey, we're citizens and we expect for you to do an honorable job.
Yes. I mean, who else? Who else are we going to expect to do an honorable job?
I really, really like this document because I wasn't aware of it, and I really appreciate you bringing it to my attention with something worth reading. And I really, really hope, no matter who you are out there that's listening, whether you're a truther or a guilter or somewhere in between, read this. This person is not your typical person. This person has a very high education. He knows exactly what he's talking about, and he does not mince words.
Yeah, I know. But then it gets better. Kratz enters then with his, oh, poor me. I was so stressed out with Avery case. I succumbed to drugs. So I have a drug and alcohol addiction. Remember that? And I'm a narcissist.
Yeah.
So he shifts the blame from himself onto the drugs and Stephen again, in that case, and alcohol and, self-meding. Now, what did we watch just recently?
Mm-hmm.
We watched How to Fix a Drug Scandal. We draw some parallels to this. One or two. What do you think?
Probably more than one.
Yeah.
I didn't watch
say
that
definitely
one.
more than.
Yeah, I haven't watched that one yet, the drug scandal one.
Okay. Well, in short, like very, very short, we have two lab technicians, of which one started using drugs that were there in the lab, available for her to use them as a control for all the drugs seized by the police from, citizens. So her job was to check if that drug was a drug and what kind of drug was it, right? So in order to do that, she would take the drug that was taken by the police as evidence, and she would compare it to the control drug, which was there in the refrigerator. So over time, I don't know how it happened. She was stressed, she was glum or whatnot. She researched and she found out that if you take methamphetamines, that it will kind of perk you up. You will be more focused, it will give you more energy, and you will be awake and alert. So she goes to the refrigerator, she takes a dropper and takes a couple of drops of methamphetamine, puts it on her tongue, and it's like, oh my, this does work. Well, one thing leads to another, and soon enough, she is completely dependent on these drugs. And it went from meth to coke. I don't know what else. I'm not too familiar with all the drugs available.
I recall them asking her about the crack pipe.
Yes, she was smoking crack at work. But the thing is that eventually she got caught, and what the DA wanted to do is kind of do the damage control. And she said, yes, we're going to reprimand her for those 2 cases because they found 2 envelopes that were sealed. And then they were like, the seal was broken and the drugs were missing. Right. So they said, yeah, we're going to see who those people were, the suspects. We're going to reprimand her and we're going to fix this problem just like that in only 2 cases because, that's what she was caught for, 2 cases.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. They never asked her, how long were you doing this? How many other cases, did you tamper with? How many cases did it go through your hands while you were on drugs, impaired thinking, right?
Yep.
They didn't want to even go there.
Not even to find out how much she had her hands in this stuff while she was drugged up.
And somehow they came to like a 6-month period. Is that right? That she was impaired for 6 months. Where it turns out, like everybody was saying, even on that show, you cannot just develop such addiction in 6 months and say, oh, okay, nothing happened before and nothing happened after. It wasn't after they gave her an immunity and she told the whole truth. And she was very blunt and very transparent, if you ask me. She told him that she got onto drugs 6 months into starting this new lab. Like she moved to that city and she started working at this particular lab. And 6 months later, she started using drugs. And she worked there almost 10 years. Wow. So what I'm trying to do is to compare to Kratz's story. He said, oh, yeah, it just happened due to the stress from Avery's case. And in 2010, I developed this addiction. We all know that that's bull.
Because if you look at the history as far as the women go, that's over 20 years.
Exactly.
Well, and in the phone calls, all the way back to the phone calls, Mama Avery's getting stuff from some guy in Stevens Point or something that are newspaper clippings that have been kept about the special prosecutor and all his misdeeds.
Yes. And I think in those documents that we Mr. Kratz, it does say that he was taking drugs for a back injury or something in like 2001. I might have the year wrong. He was doing drugs.
Oh, well, put that up. I would love to read that.
I'll look for that and I'll send it.
Very interesting. See what a little research will do you.
Yeah, I remember the person kept mailing her all kinds of newspaper clippings and articles and had arrows pointed at things and things written beside things and all kind of information on what he wanted her to know about the special prosecutor.
Well, I like this document because for me, it said everything I was thinking, but in a very professional way.
In a professional way, and that gives us the backbone also to, first of all, to your thinking that you know that you're not crazy and you're thinking, but Kratz, how is this possible? How is this possible? We're not the only one, obviously, who think that way. It's like, I was always saying, screaming at the TV, I'm like, why is this allowed? Right. Why is this allowed? How can you do this? And I don't have a thing, like 5 minutes invested into law or ethics or anything like that. This is just common sense. Mm-hmm. So when you come across this document like this, it's like a celebration day. You know what I mean?
Well, and it gives us backbone against like the guilters also.
Yeah, and just
we were tricked by a movie.
Right. Well, there's some clarity for y'all. Go look up this link.
And he was convicted and found guilty in a court of law with the jury of his peers.
Yeah. Which was all tainted. So, but as whoever said, they don't care. Kratz doesn't care. Guilters don't care. They're happy with the outcome. Whatever you say, they're going to say, why would we do that? We already have the guilty person in prison. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
That's
I
not
really, I
someone
don't
that's
spend too much.
actually
Yeah,
doing their work, the real homework. Because honestly, had these people all been doing their jobs the way it was supposed to been done, everyone would have already known the truth. And this narrative was not the truth.
yeah. And this guy, Mr. Gershman, he is a tenured professor of law at the Elizabeth Hott School of Law at Pace University, and he's been teaching since 1976 on professional ethics. He's frequently, sorry, I am free. He was frequently consulted as an expert on criminal procedures, prosecutorial misconduct, and professional ethics. He has testified as an expert witness in judicial proceedings and before the United States Congress, the New York State Legislature, and the various professional and fact-finding commissions. He writes extensively on a prosecutor's ethic duties. He's written like I don't know how many books on prosecutorial misconduct, criminal trial error and misconduct, and his books are actually frequently cited by courts and commentators. So that backbone, when they say like source it, here we go. We source it by him. And he says, I often lecture to judges, prosecutors, bar associations, and other professional and civic groups. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if he says that this is misconduct, it is misconduct.
It
Oh,
is.
yes, by any shadow of a doubt, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I already asked our listeners, what did Kratz do to Stephen Avery's right to be considered innocent until proven guilty in a court of law? And I really, really hope that some of our listeners will tell us what's on their mind. Leave us a comment. And you know where to find us. We're on social media. If you don't know where to find us, you look in our description and we have all of the links there, including our Discord. And this is kind of how our Discord goes down. When we have conversations, it's a lot like this. And I just want to invite you all to come and join us and have conversations with us. Maybe even do a little research if you want to. And guilters are always welcome. We want for people to be informed because it doesn't matter who you are. This could happen to you. And there are people out there, this person that we've been discussing today, Kratz, the document was about Gershom declaring what was done wrong by Kratz in a professional manner. But, I really, really hope that there's folks out there that maybe think they've been on that guilter's bandwagon and don't even know why. We need people out there that are actually willing to do their job appropriately to uphold justice. And so I'm just saying, look up this document. The link will be in the description. There's somebody right there who has every possible document. I mean, he's got credentials out of this world. If that doesn't say anything to you, well, I don't know what to tell you. But there is something to be said for good education. And there's something to be said for someone who just thinks they're untouchable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as far as my little feel good for the day moment.
Oh, one thing before you do that. Don't forget to come back in about 2 hours and watch Linda Kay and One Strand in the Rev on Linda Kay Listening's channel
On
on Trash
YouTube.
Talking Tuesday.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, I found a link for this cute little, it's I guess the owner of the dachshund is doing these cute little videos with the dachshund. And her name is Magpie
Oh,
.starbox. So I will
oh,
have the link in the description. But if you look that up on YouTube, you'll see she's just adorable. It just cheered me up. I used to have a dachshund, and I really needed an uplift, you know? So,
mhm.
anyhow, that will be my little feel good moment for the day for you. And I hope you guys can find more stuff out there to make you smile and make you laugh and make you feel better today because we all kind of need it. And don't count the days, make the days count.
And remember, keep washing your hands, don't lick stuff, and be a decent human being.
Stay positive.
Be kind.
Okay. Y'all have a good day. This has been a Foul Play production.